If you're a piano teacher and you're not using dice to make your lessons more fun, let me introduce you to the magic of dice. Hey, I'm Phoenix and I'm the Tattooed Piano Teacher. In this video, I'm gonna list off 11 creative ideas using dice that you can implement in your studio this week. I'm gonna list these off from the most obvious use for dice to the least obvious, some ideas hopefully you haven't thought of yet. We're gonna use dice to compose, we're gonna use dice to practice, we're gonna use dice for technique, we're gonna use dice to settle arguments, and stick around because number 10, we're even gonna use dice to memorize a piece. So let's dive right in. Dice idea number 1 is to play a music theory board game with your dice. This is what dice were intended for, so no surprise there. But if you aren't regularly implementing game time in your studio, then you're missing out on a super fun brain break / music theory magic. Music theory games feel like a treat for the student. They give you a little bit of a break and put a smile on your face as well. And they are reviewing music theory concepts. For those of you that are new around here, I create my own digital, inexpensive, printable music theory games. And if you're interested in checking those out, you can shop by type of activity or by music theory concept in my digital download store, a link in the description. Dice idea number 2 is actually an activity that I invented called Compose with Dice. Compose with Dice invites students to have a handheld as they're composing a song. So this is great for primary, elementary, and sometimes, middle schoolers and high schoolers enjoy this as well. But the way it works is that the left hand is done for them and the right hand melody notes are determined by the roll of a dice. It feels like a game, but they're actually not just composing a song, but they're opening up discussions about music theory concepts like writing notes, note values, rest values, stem direction, 5-finger scale degrees, sharps and flats. And also, because the roll of the dice determines the next note, you get to talk about harmonies and dissonances, and they might open up about, I like the sound of this note, I don't like the sound of this note. And so the activity just really supports student growth on a lot of levels, and it's fun to do. It feels like a game for them. Okay, it's time to get a little more creative with our dice usage, and let's do something you don't have to print anything out for if you don't want to. Dice idea number 3 is using your dice for warm-ups or scales at the beginning of a lesson. Many of my students work through pretty lengthy either scale booklets or collections of warm-ups to the point where we wouldn't want to play all of them in the lesson. It would take too much time. The dice can make this into a fun game and help us rotate those scales. I use the Wonder Keys supplemental books with a lot of my students. There are a ton of choices at all of the micro levels of the primer level 1 difficulty level. And all of these books come with a 2-page warm-up spread, and there are 5 very short warm-ups. So I tell the kids to roll a dice. If they roll a 1, they play the first one, 2, they roll the second one, and so on. And if they roll a 6, they get to pick which one they want to play. I also give them a die to take home with them and keep so they can do this at home as well. It takes warm-ups from something that you can't get them to do. It's so dry. They're fighting you on playing more than one, to something that's a game. And they can't wait to do it at the beginning of each lesson. And hopefully they're doing it when they're practicing at home as well. Dice idea number 4 is using the dice to fairly distribute activities amongst partners and small groups. A typical scenario when I have partner lessons is they'll both come in and I usually have them take turns playing back and forth throughout the lesson, but the big question is who goes first? So usually the first thing we're going to play, I will ask them who would like to go first today. And if they both raise their hands, in order for things to be fair, I'll hand them both a die, have them roll it, highest goes first. This keeps everything really amiable amongst the 3 of us. It helps them from bickering at all with each other, and it helps me look like a fair person, so neither of them are feeling like I'm ignoring them. Okay, let's get into some dice usage for in-lesson practice time. Dice idea number 5 is to use the dice to repeat a tricky passage within the song. We all know that when a student gets to a certain point, they're feeling a little burnt out on a song they're working on, but it's not up to our standards yet. We know exactly what they need to do to get over that final hurdle and have this piece polished and ready to graduate. And we're almost afraid to tell them what to do because we know they're going to go, "Oh, I don't want to play those measures over and over again." Perhaps you've even told your students, these are the measures you need to practice 5 times a day before you play the piece. Send them home. Do they do it? No, they don't. So what I like to do is, instead of me telling them to practice it 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, let's have the dice tell them how many times to play it. This turns it into a game, and they're going to be playing it up to 6 times if you use 1 die and up to 12 times if you use 2 dice. For my older kids, I will get both dice out and they will have to play it 12 times in a row if they get that one. So just like when you're playing a board game with someone and you roll a number you weren't hoping for, when it's in a game setting, you're just like, oh no. It makes everything so much more lighthearted. So yes, this does mean that they might only have to play it once, but you can always get creative as a teacher and trust the dice. The dice can be the good guy or the bad guy, so you don't have to be. Now that tactic works if there's only 1 or 2 spots that really need extra practice. But what if you have a student who has a lot of sections in their piece that really need a lot of help? Sometimes in this case, instead of overwhelming them by saying you need to work on this measure and this measure and this part wasn't right, you need to do this, I will have them lay their book flat with all of the pages of the piece open if possible, and then we will roll a die or a pair of dice onto the actual book to see what measures it lands on. For a shorter piece, we might just go with the measure that it landed on or the phrase that it lands on. Or if things are a little more serious with a longer piece, then I might split it into sections. So I know there's something to work on in every section, so we won't be wasting our time no matter where the dice fall. Again, this is just taking the pressure off of you and it's gamifying the experience. So the student isn't thinking, oh, I knew she was gonna make me play that measure. They're just thinking, oh, well, that's where the dice rolled, so I guess that's what I'm gonna work on. So it just kind of takes the blame game away and just makes it into a fun game. I've got a few more practice ideas here. So dice idea number 7 is to use the dice for doubles, triples, quadruples, etc. So we all know the trick that if you have a long passage of 8th notes or 16th notes, something where the fingers are starting to get uneven or you want them to get quicker, then we'll have them double each note, triple each note. What if you take one of these passages, say a 2-octave scale for the right hand, and you roll the dice to see how many times you're going to repeat each note. So if they roll a 1, they get to play it regular. So you want to do this a few times. If they roll a 2, they're doubling, 3, they're tripling. If they roll a 6, they have to go da 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 da. And this might be a little excessive, but like I said, if you roll a few times, it can really make what would be a tedious practice strategy into something really fun. Dice idea number 8 is to use the dice to determine the tempo that you're going to use. Again, this could be used for a small passage that you really want to work on. So in this case, I might assign 1 to be the slowest and 6 to be the fastest, or I might assign a specific metronome marking to each number before we roll. Let's say there's a part where you really just want the student to repeat that section quite a few times, but you don't want it to be tedious. Let the dice choose the tempo for each time they play it. And hopefully they will be playing it fast and slow and medium. Because it's dice, it's gonna feel like game time to them. But to you, you're like, hey, they just played that 5 times in a row and I never could get them to do that before. And you know that students love to play something extremely way too fast. Hopefully the dice rolls in your favor, but it can be fun either way. Again, you're not the bad guy for asking them to slow it down or speed it up. It's all the dice. Rolling the dice for the tempo can also be used for an entire song if you just want them to play it a second or third time for you, but you don't want them to just straight repeat it once again. You don't want things to feel boring. You want it to be exciting and give them an alternative goal to think about as they're playing it again. Not unlike the last one, number 9 dice idea is to use the dice to determine the dynamics. Again, this is a sneaky trick to get them to repeat a certain section or even to play an entire song again. You can also use this for creative purposes if you're doing improv or composition. Usually I will assign 1 to be the softest, 6 to be the loudest, and everything in between. We can talk about the dynamic symbols and the Italian terms and all of that as well. So this can be another fun thing that honestly you can do from the very first lesson for a very young student to start to teach them about louds and softs and the finger pressure on the keys. Hey, I've got 2 more coming to you. The next one's about memorization. Before I give you number 10, be sure to hit that like button if you're finding this content useful and you'd like to see more videos like this from me in the future. So dice idea number 10 is to roll a section to try from memory. So one of the most tedious things in a lesson, I think, is when you're trying to get a student to branch out and memorize more of the piece, and you don't want them to just go in order. Maybe you want them to memorize the end first or the middle first. Well, the dice can help you start to do this. Sometimes students have more of it memorized than they think. They're just a little scared to go off of the book. So why not let the dice pick what part they are going to play from memory? Here's what I like to do. I have a pair of dice and a booklet of Post-its, and we roll the dice again onto the flat piece so that we can see where it lands. If it's a short piece, it can land on just a measure or just a note if they really need that stepping stone for memorizing it, or for older kids, maybe a section. And then I'm going to cover up that part with Post-its, have them start from the beginning, and then see if they can get past the Post-it part. Now, this is something that you can do with or without dice, obviously. I love the Post-it trick for memorization. However, the dice is the bad guy, not you. So they're not going to think, oh, you're being so mean by covering up that particular measure, because you didn't decide what measure it was. And my final dice idea, number 11, is just literally whatever comes to me in the moment. I have a few pairs of dice in my drawer at all times, right next to me when I'm teaching. Sometimes my students will come up with ideas to use the dice. They're like, hey, can we get the dice out for this? Absolutely, the answer is yes. And also, sometimes I think, what's a creative way that we can get from point A to point B? How can we use the dice for that? So I use the dice for many things that my brain isn't thinking right now for this video, but I'm sure if you're a piano teacher, you're a creative person too. So if you got an idea for dice usage in piano lessons during this video, or if you already use dice, would you please share in the comments how you like to use dice in your piano lessons, so we can all learn from each other's experience and get some fresh activities going with our students. Remember, there are links in the descriptions if you'd like to check out the Compose with Dice sets for your students, or any of my other digital resources so you can print, have those dice ready to go, and have some fun theory time. And if you want to keep watching, related to this video, I'm working on a video about how to make in-lesson practice more fun. So we're going to expand beyond these dice ideas to more ideas of how you can get those students to do exactly what they need to do practice-wise, but make it fun and not tedious. Once that video is live, I'll put it right here for you, and I hope to see you there. Bye.